everybody, John King with Summit Funding, and super happy to be coming to you today. I had a little bit of changes to my studio. Yes, I have a studio. And so now I'm being told my camera is off a little bit. So let me adjust my camera just a little, which is messing with my background, but maybe that's a little better. Okay, anyway, the fun of coming to you live and changing up equipment, but we'll figure it out and work through it. So no big deal. Anyway, thank you for joining me today. This is a fun topic. I want to talk about the process of buying a home. So every week on Financial Friday, we talk about something that has to do with your finances. Maybe it is mortgage related. By the way, I'm a little bit too far that way. There you go. Now I'm centered more. All right. So often it's mortgage related. Sometimes it's about your finances. We talk about things about investing in stocks and that kind of thing. And so today we're going to be talking about a topic near and dear to my heart. What is the process of buying a home? Like what really happens from start to finish when you're buying a home? And it's something that is a little bit mysterious. A lot of people don't understand what really goes into it, how many people are involved in the process. And so I'm going to take the better part of an hour and kind of help walk you through that. So if you're watching live and you have questions, feel free to post those questions into chat and I'll respond to them. If you're watching recorded and you have questions, feel free, shoot me an email, put a question into chat. This is really going to be designed for people as you, whether it be today or sometime in the future, you might be embarking on the decision to, hey, I think I want to buy a home. And you may have come across this video or I may have sent it to you on purpose. But the point is, I want to guide you into, hey, what are the things that I need to know? What are the things I need to pay attention to about the process of buying a home? So I'm going to kick right into it. And I'm going to start with a controversial statement. You got to decide first if homeownership is right for you. Now, wait a second, John. What do you mean decide if homeownership is right for me? Like, isn't that what you do is home loans? And isn't homeownership right for everybody? For the most part, I think that most people are better served being homeowners than not being homeowners. But the truth is, there are people who shouldn't be homeowners for many, many different situations, many different circumstances. I actually have a whole video I did a few months ago on the pros and cons of renting or buying. You can see that link down below if you're watching this recorded. We'll embed that in here. But it really is about, is this the right thing for me to do? Should I own a home? The first thing I implore you is do not assume that owning a home is the best thing for you. It may not be. So you need to really think about, is this a good idea? How long am I planning on keeping this home? Do I need to make a move? Or do I expect to have to move? Maybe you have job transfers or aspirations to grow into a position that's going to have you moving across the country. All of those things come into play that you have to think about and say, should I own a home? The other side of it is your stability, the stability of your income, the stability of your finances. You're often going to say, well, John, you preach about how homeownership builds wealth. And that's true. So now you're telling me I don't have stable finances, I shouldn't be a homeowner? That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you have to be understanding that if your income is not stable, if you're in a career that is unstable, you're in car sales and you just got into car sales for the first time and you're making great money your first 2 months, that's not the time to go buy a home. First of all, I won't qualify you. But secondly, even if you found a way to get qualified, that isn't the time to buy a home because you need to make sure that you have stable income, predictable income, because if you weren't a homeowner, you can say, oh man, my income isn't as good as what I thought. I can just, give up my apartment and move into a smaller apartment or move in with a buddy or something like that. You have some flexibility. When you're a homeowner, you're the homeowner. That's all there is to it. And so you have to be able to make it work. So decide if homeownership is right for you is step one. Okay, I've decided homeownership is right for me. What you need to do is you need to pick your team. And it's super critical to think of us as your team. You need to have a realtor, you need to have a lender on your side, and they need to be working together. You cannot keep them separate from one another. When you're looking to buy a home and be successful, doesn't mean you have to go with a lender and realtor that have always worked together. That's often a good idea. But the fact is, hey, if you know a realtor that you worked with a whole bunch of family members and you really, really trust them, and you know a lender that you've worked with or somebody else has worked with and you really, really trust them and they don't know each other, no big deal. You just make sure you're connecting them. Make sure that they are having a conversation and acting as a team. So the question that is begged to ask is, John, how do I choose a realtor? So here's what I don't think you should do. I don't think you should go on Zillow and click view a property and go view the property and say, wow, that person was nice. That's what a lot of people do. And more importantly is they then go to somebody else because they see a different property on Zillow and they click on that one and a different realtor shows them that property. Oh yeah, well, that person was nice too. There's a lot of nice people in real estate, but this is a market that requires a professional to guide you. Same with your lender. We'll talk about lenders in a minute. The fact is you've got to have a professional that guides you. And the best way to find the professional first and foremost is through referral. So find family members, friends, people you know and trust. I'm going to sneeze here in a second. I'm going to mute too. All right, well, the fun of being live. Anyway, good news, I caught the mute button before I sneezed. All right, so find a family member that you know, find a friend that you know that's bought a house and say, hey, what was your experience with your realtor? If you were to buy or sell a home again, would you use them? And poll a few people and figure out who you want to interview. Yes, it's an interview. You need to talk to the realtor and say, hey, tell me about what your process is to help me be successful in my home buying journey. Tell me what makes you different than other realtors that are on the market and explain to me why I should pick you. Now, this is not a race to who's going to give you the cheapest price. The truth is, right now, the way the market is set up, you as the buyer don't pay the realtor anything. The seller pays the realtor. But you might think, well, then that doesn't matter. I'm just going to go with, I can have multiple realtors helping me out then because I'm not paying them, and whoever finds me the home, they deserve to get paid. That is the worst way to go. Because if you have multiple realtors looking for a home for you, you're going to go to one house and you're going to say, oh my gosh, this house is great, except the backyard's too small. Well, what they didn't realize is that the backyard was critical and so is the size of the kitchen. But the kitchen was fine, so you didn't complain about it. You go to another house with a different realtor and you're like, oh my gosh, this house is great because it's got a big enough backyard, but the kitchen is just too small. Now, neither one of them have the whole picture of what you're trying to accomplish. And a great realtor is going to help you sort through the homes that are out there, which, by the way, this is an amazing time right now. So I'm recording this in September of 2022. This is the perfect time to be able to select a home of your liking. But that also means there's a lot of homes out there right now that you can choose from. And you have to decide what criteria is most important to me. Because a big part of what's happening right now is people are afraid to buy a home because of interest rates having gone up so much, and they're waiting for rates to drop again. Well, that's great. And rates at some point will drop again, in my opinion. But when that happens, housing prices are going to skyrocket, and there's going to be bidding wars again, where there's going to be 20 people offering to buy one home. And the seller's going to say, great, then you don't get to do any inspections. You don't get to do anything. We'll talk about this in a little bit. The point being, getting back to how you choose a realtor, because I got a bit on a tangent there. The point is, excuse me. The point is you want to pick one realtor that is working on your behalf, that is somebody that you trust. Now, if partway through the process, you don't feel like you're getting the best service from that realtor, you have the right to fire them and to hire somebody else. But here's the truth. If you got fired from your job, wouldn't you expect that your employer at least told you in advance, hey, I'm not happy with your performance? You really should do the same with your realtor. If you feel like something's missing, tell them. Say, hey, I need more from you. I expected blank and I'm not getting that. How can we fix this? If they're the right person that you selected, they're going to fix it. If they don't, they deserve to be fired. So pay attention to who you pick a horse and stick riding that horse through to the end. That's my best recommendation when it comes to selecting a realtor. All right. When it comes to how to choose a lender, that's easy. It's me. You think I'm joking? That's the truth. Okay, moving on. No, I'm kidding. How to choose a lender. Here's what most people think. Look, it's whoever's going to give me the lowest interest rate and fee is all that matters, because the lender is going to sell my loan anyway, and it doesn't matter who gave me the loan. I'm going to be sold to somebody else down the road. That's partially true. But there's a lot more involved in how the lender educates you, how the lender communicates with you, and how the lender assists you with strategy. Those are critical components that the average loan officer is not equipped to help you with. And so when you're looking for a good loan officer, talk to them about, hey, what's your process for educating me? What's your process for communicating with me? How do you help me with strategy and help me get my offers accepted? And how do you make sure that I close on time? Those are critical components that loan officers don't typically understand as their role. They kind of look at the same thing saying, hey, somebody's just going to choose me because I'm the lowest interest rate and fee. And sometimes they will get business because they're the lowest rate and fee. But that person isn't getting the service they deserve, most importantly, because of the lack of education, communication, and strategy to help you decide what the right approach is and how to get your offer accepted instead of all of the other people that are also competing for this home. And I kid you not, there's a lot of competition still happening right now. We'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. So let's switch now to the next phase. By the way, I got a comment here. What do I got? So Joseph says, it's true, John King, you're a great lender. Thanks for helping us purchase our home. Joseph, thank you so much for that. I appreciate it. I appreciate you, and I appreciate you watching and sharing. So thank you. So let's talk through the pre-approval process. When you decide it's time to buy, even if you say, okay, I want to buy a home, but I don't know when, you should start talking to your realtor and lender and coming up with your team early. Now, when I say early, I'm talking it could be a year before you're ready to buy. And you say, hey, I'm going to be graduating school in May of 2023, and I have a job lined up that's going to be starting in August. And so I'm about a year away from being ready to buy a home. Now is the right time to start the conversation. Now is the right time not to get pre-approved, but to have the pre-approval conversation. Start the education process. Start the process of discovery, of figuring out what am I really looking for in a home. What I find is that people hide. They look from the shadows at the housing market, and they decide, hey, well, maybe I'm thinking about buying a home. I'm going to check things out a little bit, but I'm afraid to actually ask questions because I'm afraid that the realtor or the lender, they're going to try and convince me to do something now. A good realtor and a good lender are not going to do that. They're going to help you based on your timeline. We're going to talk about pros and cons of your timeline, but we're going to help you according to your timeline. Here's the reality. My industry right now is shrinking. There's a lot of people who are struggling right now in lending, and realtors are feeling the same thing because there's just not as much business happening today. And a lot of people are desperate, and they're going to take somebody who says, hey, I'm thinking about doing something down the road, and try and convince you to change your mind and do something now, not because it's in your best interest, but because they need a paycheck. You need to be aware of that fact. You need to be on the lookout because when things get more scarce, people get more scared. And so when you're thinking about starting the process, the time to get pre-approved is really, really early, but make sure you're talking to the right person who's not going to push you to do something. But what we're going to do is we're going to advise you on things you didn't even know mattered and things that you need to have time to address, that if you would have waited until July of next year to open that can of worms, you realize I'm out of time. I want to buy next month, and I wish I would have known a year ago that I needed to do X, Y, and Z. I met with a client recently who had no credit. Not because they couldn't, they have great income, they've saved a lot of money, but they've done it through not opening up credit, and they followed a plan. A lot of people that give plans on how you should manage your debt. And this client followed a plan that said, don't use credit. Credit's bad. And it's worked well for them. The problem is it's not something the mortgage industry likes. We're a debt. We don't want you to test yourself out for the first time with a mortgage. And so this client's coming to me ready to buy and realizing it's going to take 6 months. Get a credit card, have that credit card open for 6 months before it builds your credit history. Now, we found a loophole around it, and there's some loopholes that we can work through, but that's because he's got a huge down payment. In most situations, that's not the case where somebody has a huge down payment. So that's an example of the time to get pre-approved is as early as possible, long before you're ready to buy, so that we can make sure things you didn't know were a problem can get addressed. So let's talk about some issues regarding the pre-approval process. First of all, I've had people call me and say, hey, John, I want to get pre-approved. I got great credit. I make $10,000 a month in income between my wife and I. And, we've got 750 credit score because I just pulled it on Credit Karma. So can you get me a pre-approval letter? No. A pre-approval is me looking at everything, me getting copies of your credit report, pulling a copy of your credit report, me getting your bank statements and paycheck stubs and tax returns, and validating everything is true. Now, some online banks will give a pre-approval letter without needing all that paperwork. And all they're doing is setting you up for failure. I have so many stories about people who were told by an online bank, no problem, no problem, no problem. And then in the end, problem. And that's the thing that you need to be aware of is you say, yeah, but John, that doesn't apply to me. Here's the truth. You don't know what applies to you or doesn't apply to you because you don't know the rules of my industry. And that's where I'm the expert. And you say, yeah, but I talked to a guy at the bank and he said it's not going to be a problem. And he's an expert too. Well, you might want to take a look and see what his reviews look like. Go to reviews for online banks and you're going to see a lot of reviews that aren't so favorable. You go check out my reviews. I'm pretty sure you can find those at reviews.johnloneking.com. You check out my reviews, you're going to see hundreds upon hundreds of reviews. And out of 5 stars, I think I'm like 4.8. You're going to find a couple people who weren't happy because it's impossible to make everybody happy all the time. But a majority of my clients are super, super happy. That's what you have to be able to trust. That's what you have to look at and say, this person knows what they're talking about. Just like Joseph said a little bit earlier about you gave me a testimonial, a review right here live a couple of minutes ago. That's exactly what you're looking for, is to get validation I'm working with the right person and that what they're telling me is really going to come true. So now you're in the process of getting pre-approved and you're like, well, wait a second. I hear these terms pre-qualified, pre-approved, or full approval. John, what's the difference and why does it matter? So a pre-qualification is what an online lender might do, what a process that is not looking out for your best interest, but just trying to churn people as quickly as they can. And they're going to say, yeah, based on what you told me, you're qualified. Here's a letter. And they don't care if in the end it fails because they spent very little time. They invested very little time up front. The truth is they figure, hey, a lot of people aren't going to end up coming back. So why should I waste time? They're not going to find a home. They're going to pick a different lender. Whatever's going to happen, why should I invest time up front? And I'm really going to, who cares if my reputation is bad in the marketplace? Because people come to me anyway because I have the lowest rates and the lowest fees. So I don't really need to give good service or have a good reputation because they'll keep coming back because I spend billions of dollars in advertising and I have super low rates and fees. But ladies and gentlemen, you get what you pay for. Now, I'm not saying that I would charge a whole lot more. What I'm saying is I'm never going to be the cheapest. I don't want to be. I'm right in the middle. I'm right on par with where the market is, but you're always going to find somebody cheaper and you almost always get what you pay for. So a pre-qualification is not worth the paper that it's printed on. A pre-approval means I, the loan officer, have reviewed everything and I have said, yes, you are in good shape. That's based on my word. That's based on my knowledge and my ability as a loan officer. And I've been doing this for 22 years. I'm not telling you that spending 22 years doing anything makes you an expert. I'm telling you I'm an expert. I'm really good at what I do. And I pride myself in understanding my industry and my rules very, very well. Most loan officers, they don't. But they say, hey, you're pre-approved. And then you run into a problem later. So that's where the industry started going to this third step called full pre-approval. The underwriter is the person who's licensed to make the final decision on behalf of the entity setting the rules. That's Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, FHA, VA. So a full pre-approval means an underwriter has reviewed the file and they have said, hey, your cash, down payment and closing costs, your credits, how well you paid your bills in the past, and your income, the amount of money coming in to pay your bills in the future. All 3 of those are golden. And from here forward, as long as nothing changes, that's the key. We're going to verify everything again. But as long as nothing changes, you're going to qualify. We just have to make sure the house qualifies, that it's in the condition and value that we need it to be. And we'll talk in a couple of minutes about how that works. How long does this pre-approval process take? Well, I'll tell you, it depends. If you were to call me this morning and you were to give me all of your information, send me your paycheck stubs and W-2s and bank statements that I asked for, I can typically get a pre-approval done in a few hours. But it also depends on how complicated the situation is. Depends on whether we're looking for a full loan approval or not. Some pre-approvals can take 2 or 3 days, or some can take a couple of weeks because I've got to dig deeper. and ask for a letter from your employer verifying your commission income, because it doesn't add up when I look at the paycheck stubs. There's a lot of things I look at in the beginning because I don't want to have a problem later. So even though common sense says everything should be fine, common sense doesn't exist in my industry. I'm going to tell you a quick story about why common sense doesn't exist in my industry. Because my industry, my company provides a warranty. Really, it is called representations and warranties. We provide a warranty to the federal government that says, hey, we have met every rule that you've asked us to meet on this loan. And if later you audit the file and find out that we didn't meet the rules, we'll write you a check for the full value of the loan and buy it back from you. I got a call last week from our national head of operations telling me, hey, John, I've got a client that we did a loan for in 2015, 7 years ago, and they're in default. They've been in and out of default over the last couple of years. And so the federal government grabbed the loan, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, they grabbed the loan and they did an audit. And they found that we missed something in a technicality on the loan at the beginning. And we didn't document something the way we were supposed to document it. And they're making us write a check to pay them back in full, not only for the face value of the loan, but for all of the losses that have been incurred because they were in default. We're stuck with that $500,000 debt 7 years later because of one technicality. So this process, and we'll talk more about underwriting and how that process works in a couple minutes, but this process of getting you approved isn't just about, well, common sense says I make enough money. We have to be able to defend that position 7 and 10 years later based on the paperwork we have in the file. It is critical that we document everything to a T, because we are out millions of dollars if we get called to the carpet on something we can't prove years down the road. So in general, a pre-approval can take anywhere from a couple of hours to a week or so, or longer, depending upon how much information we have to dig into. How long is a pre-approval good for? So here's an interesting thing. A pre-approval is actually good for 60 days, but that's only based on what my company decides to put as an expiration date. The actual expiration doesn't exist. What exists is the paperwork you provided has to be no less than 30 days old at the time you go into contract. So if you give me a paycheck stub and it's dated today and you go into contract 2 weeks from now, I don't need any new paycheck stubs. But if you go into contract 6 weeks from now, I do. And the question is, does the information ever change on the pay stub? Does the information change on your bank statement? Does your information change on your credit report is the biggest one. You can control how much money is in your bank and where you deposited what you spent. You can control, to a degree, your income and your pay and the fact that you have the same number of hours and you're not changing jobs. You can't control your credit sometimes. You might have to have charged something up on your credit card because you had an unexpected expense that you had to pay for. Or you pay for business expenses and that charges your credit card up and then you pay it off at the end of the month. But it just so happens that the credit report expires at 4 months. And I've got to pull a new credit report and the score could fall. So as an industry, every company sets their own standard that says, how long we're going to let this person shop without checking in with me again. That's all the pre-approval expiration date means, is how long am I going to let you shop for a home without checking in with me again to make sure nothing has changed about your income, about your credit, or about your money that you have for down payment and closing costs. Most banks, it's anywhere from 45 days to 90 days, and we typically have a 60-day expiration on our pre-approval letter. So now you're pre-approved. It's time to go shopping for a home. This is the fun part or the excruciating part. Kind of depends on your temperament and how picky you are. Here's the deal. In today's market, there's a lot more homes available than we've seen over the last couple of years. There's a lot more opportunity for negotiation. But what you've got is you've got sometimes too many choices. And people start freaking out and they start, 2 years ago, I had people say, my gosh, if I could just get somebody to accept my offer, I'd be super happy. Now you've got 10 people that are willing to accept your offer and you're still not super happy. Now you're afraid you're making the wrong decision. That's the biggest frustration with the home shopping process is unless you're buying a new home, and even then there's a lot of frustration, you can't pick exactly the right home. You've got to be willing to make some compromises. What you have to decide when you're shopping for a home, is what am I willing to compromise? What things do I have to have in my home, and what things are nice to have in my home? And if you can outline what those things are, you're going to be way more successful in the home buying process, because it's almost impossible to find a home that checks all the boxes. Location is one of the most important things you want to pay attention to, because you can't move the home. You can change the bathroom count. You can add a bathroom. You can change the flooring. You can change the backyard. You can change a lot of things about a home. You cannot change its location. So location is the most critical piece of it. What school district are you in? What neighborhood are you in? What's the neighborhood like? All of those factors are critical simply because they're not easily changed. And then you start looking at what other things are critical to you, and you make your list of, hey, I've got to have this and I don't have to have that. The key in today's market, though, there's a lot of options. A lot of people are worried, saying, gosh, John, I don't want to buy now because I think prices might drop in the future. They might. But what I'll tell you is happening is every time that interest rates go up, prices drop. And that's what's driving this price drop, because people can't afford homes at the higher interest rates, and sellers need to sell. Some sellers do. And so they're dropping the price of the home because they have to attract buyers that wanted that house and could have afforded it when rates were at 5%, but now they're at 6.5%. They can't afford it anymore. So the seller needs to lower the price of the home. So when you say, John, I want to wait because I want to buy the house at a lower price, the truth is, waiting, if you're right and prices drop more, it's going to be because interest rates have gone up more, and you're not going to save any money. And what you're going to lose is you're going to lose time in the markets. Because the key to me for wealth building in real estate is not timing the market, it's time in the market. I did a video the other day, I'll link it down below. It's the 3 keys to building wealth through homeownership. And I'll give you a brief 10-second. The 3 keys are simple. It's tax savings. That's the first key. The second key is your forced savings account. And the third key is appreciation. Those are the 3 ways that you build wealth through homeownership. Only one of them, the third, appreciation, has to do with what the market value is doing. The first 2 simply have to do with jump in and start owning. Your tax savings is actually greater when you have a higher interest rate. A little counterintuitive, but it's true. So even at high interest rates, you're actually building more wealth by getting better tax savings at the same time. So when you're shopping for a home, those are the things that I want you to be thinking about. I want to share with you a term that is a legal term called procuring cause. What is procuring cause, John? Procuring cause is and I'm not going to give the legal definition of it, but it is the circumstance where a realtor says, hey, I am the reason the Smith family wants to buy the house on Main Street. How does that person claim they're the reason? Because they're the ones that opened the home for you first and showed it to you first. Let's use a simple example. Let's pretend you go to Best Buy and you're looking to buy a TV. And somebody comes up to you and says, hey, how may I help you? And you're like, oh, no, thanks, I'm just looking. And then somebody else, how may I help you? Just looking. Third guy comes up and says, hey, looks like you're looking at TVs. Can I show you a nicer one over here that's actually lower priced? And you're like, sure, no problem. You go look at the nicer TV. He shows it to you. You're like, all right, cool. I'm still going to think about it. And so he walks away. If that was, and then let's pretend that the next day you come back and you buy that TV. If this was real estate, that guy that showed you the TV, he's the reason you bought it. He deserves the commission because he's the one that told you about it and showed it to you. That makes logical sense. He should get the commission. He's the one that showed it to you. In real estate law in California, procuring cause says the realtor who first opened the house for you, they're the same thing. They're the reason that you want that house. Therefore, they're due the commission. They automatically represent you. Now, you can go to another realtor to write the offer, and then they'll just sue that other realtor to get the commission, and that realtor just donated their time. Why do I say this? Because all too often, people don't want to call their realtor to look at a home because they don't want to bother them. So they say, you know what, it's Sunday. I don't want to bother my realtor. I'm just going to call the person whose name is on the sign in front of the house and have them come open it for me. They are now the procuring cause. Now, could they say, oh, no, I'm okay, I give up, I'll let your realtor handle it and I won't fight for the commission? Sure, they can. But they can also make it a nightmare for you and for the realtor that you want to use. So the reason I say this is, as you are thinking about the process of buying a home, always always, always call your realtor to say, I found a home I want to look at. Can you show it to me? If your realtor can't show it to you, they're likely to have a backup realtor that can show it on their behalf. Now, they're the ones that initiated that. The same holds true if you're thinking about new construction. This is critical. Most people don't understand this. If you are thinking of buying a brand new home and you're working with a realtor, potentially thinking about buying a resale home, every single time you walk into a new home community, you have to have the first time you walk into any new home community, you need to have your realtor with you, because most new home communities will allow your realtor to represent you, and they'll pay your realtor out of the fee that they were normally going, or the profit that they were normally going to keep. So you don't pay anything extra for the new home to get your realtor compensated, and they get to represent you and negotiate on your behalf. Versus if you walk in without a realtor, they say, hey, your realtor wasn't the procuring cause. They weren't the reason for you to walk in this door. Therefore, we're not going to allow your realtor to participate. Now, they can still negotiate on your behalf, but they're not getting paid to do it, which means either you're asking them to work pro bono. Would you work pro bono? Or you have to pay them out of your pocket for the time that they're spending. Either way, you missed an opportunity to have better representation with no additional cost. So every time you go into a brand new home community for the first time, bring your realtor with you. If they don't cooperate, that's the industry term of co-op. If they don't cooperate and pay your realtor, they'll tell you that when they walk in. Then you decide, okay, do I want to go on this by myself and not have representation? Do I want to pay my realtor myself to represent me? Or do I not want to buy in this community because they won't let my realtor represent me? Those are your three options. But the key is, if you walk into the community the first time without your realtor, you don't have that as an option. All right, so a lot of worry about interest rates right now. A lot of worry about where are rates going, what's the Fed doing, what's happening with rates. And a lot of people are worried about where are rates going to go while I'm shopping for a home. In general, you cannot lock an interest rate while you're shopping for a home. When you lock an interest rate, you're locking it for that home in particular. So, John, why are you talking about this? Because there are some programs, we have one that allows you to lock an interest rate for anywhere from 60 to 120 days, depending upon a lot of circumstances. But you're paying an upfront fee for that. You're buying an insurance policy against rates going up. And if you don't buy within that timeline, your rate lock goes away, and so does your fee. So the money that you spent is that upfront fee to get the guaranteed rate for that, let's call it 90 days, you lost it. So you have to be committed that I am going to buy, and I'm going to buy within the next 90 days. I'm going to do whatever it takes to buy within the next 90 days. Then and only then do I think it makes sense to do the upfront rate lock. Something critical for you to consider if you're saying, hey, I know I'm going to buy right away. I'm afraid interest rates are going to keep going up. And the cool thing about this, what we call our lock and shop program, is if you do this program, you've spent the upfront fee to buy this insurance policy. But if rates happen to be lower once you go into contract, we can actually give you the lower interest rate. So you do get great protection because you're protected against rates going higher, and you get the benefit if rates go lower. But it's something you have to be willing to take the risk that the money you spent up front is lost if you don't close within that, let's call it 90-day time frame. Let's talk a little bit about contingencies. Contingencies are critical to understand. These are things your realtor's going to cover. They're going to help you understand this, and they're going to put it in the contract for negotiation. But a contingency is three major things. You have a loan contingency. That says, by the way, contingencies in general in the state of California say, hey, I can cancel this contract as the buyer and get all my upfront deposit back, not the money you spent on inspections or appraisal, but the money you gave the title company as your earnest money deposit. You can get that money back if you cancel within the contingency period for a reason that fits under the contingency. What that means, for example, on a loan contingency is you have 17 days as a standard timeline to get your loan approval. And if within that 17 days, the lender comes back and says, oh, I'm sorry, you're not qualified. Well, it's likely you weren't working with me because I don't let that happen. But it does happen to other people. I've had it happen once or twice when something comes up that we didn't expect. Somebody loses a job. Somebody told me they were going to get money for a gift and they didn't end up getting the gift money. Things do come up. But if that happened and you were within that first 17 days, you can tell your realtor, hey, tell the seller we're canceling and I want the $5,000 back that I had put as an upfront earnest money deposit. So 3 types of contingencies. First is your loan contingency, like I just explained. Second is the appraisal contingency. That says, hey, I'm going to have an appraisal done on the home. If the appraiser says there's problems with the condition of the home, or more importantly, the value of the home, he doesn't think it's worth what we agreed to, I have the right to cancel. Now, the seller has the right to negotiate. So any of these contingencies where you say, hey, I'm canceling because the appraisal came in $5,000 lower. If the seller says, hey, I'll lower the price and cover that $5,000, you don't have the right to cancel anymore. You can, meaning if you tried to use that as an excuse to walk away, the seller could remedy that issue. Same with the third type of contingency, which is the inspection contingency. Inspections is your opportunity to do home inspections, to do pest inspection, roof inspection, but even more than that, it's your opportunity to inspect the neighborhood, to say, hey, I didn't realize that I was a half a mile away from the city dump and that every day at noon it smells like rotten eggs. You have your inspection period to figure that out. If you didn't figure it out in that inspection period, you have to buy the home, or if you don't buy the home, you're losing your earnest money deposit, or your earnest money deposit's at risk. Same thing with the inspections, and actually more important with the inspections. Some people say, oh, I'll just cancel because of inspections, even though the truth is I just got cold feet. Well, if you told the seller, look, I did an inspection on the house, and I'm just not happy with the fact that the downstairs is purple, and that I'm going to have to use it's going to cost me more money to repaint it because we have to primer it first, and I don't want to do that. Well, if the seller said, okay, I'll repaint it for you for free, he just remedied the contingency. So just be aware that when you enter into a contract, you said, I want to buy this house from you for this price, and the seller says, cool, I'm going to sell the house to you for this price. You have those 3 contingencies to protect you so that in case something comes up that wasn't expected, you can get your money back. But it's not an easy way out just by saying, oh, I changed my mind and I'll use one of the contingencies. So just be aware of that. In today's market, it's a lot easier to get your contingencies and even get longer contingencies if you needed them. But the market we were in 2020 and 2021, if you didn't have extra money to cover a short appraisal, you didn't get your offer accepted. If you wanted to have an inspection or appraisal contingency, there's a good chance the seller had some other offer that didn't want those contingencies, and those people were winning. So now is an amazing time to buy a home because you can actually investigate the home and make sure that it is what you expected it to be, instead of having to cross your fingers, close your eyes, and hope that everything comes out okay. So that's the definition of contingencies. Super important to know that as you're looking at shopping for homes. So how do I make my offer stand out? Well, there's a lot of things that you can do. First of all, you're going to say, what do you mean, John? Why do I need my offer to stand out? We're in a market right now where it's easy to get, there's more homes for sale than people that want to buy them. Don't kid yourself. Well-priced homes in highly desirable neighborhoods are going off the shelf immediately. So you still need, if you're looking for a great home in a great neighborhood for a great price, you're going to be in competition. So you've got to figure out, how do you structure your offer? Maybe you shorten your contingencies. Maybe you offer to pay for all the title and escrow fees. You definitely need to look at ways to make you look stronger as a buyer. And a big piece of that is how your lender helps you get your offer accepted. One of the things that we're in the process of rolling out is a on-time closing guarantee that says, I guarantee that I will close this loan and that I'll close it within 21 days. And if I don't close the loan, I will pay the seller $15,000 for non-performance. Now, there's a lot of rules that you have to go through as the buyer to qualify for that program, and we have to pre-underwrite everything and double check everything. But the fact is, if we get you to that stage, you will have a guarantee backing you from me that says you can tell the seller, my offer should be your number one offer to look at because I promise you we're going to get it closed. Because if we don't, my lender's writing you a check for $15,000. That is critical as a way to help you get your offer accepted. Another thing that I do, and again, these are things that other lenders may or may not do, is I'm involved in the negotiation process, not because I'm negotiating on your behalf, but I'm talking with you and your buyer's agent, your agent, on strategy. On, hey, what if we did this and that? What if we crafted the offer a little bit different? Because I can crunch the numbers and show you how that change really impacts your cash to close, your interest rate, and your monthly payment. But most important is the communication from me or from your lender to the listing agent the moment the offer is written. Because that opens the agent to the fact that, wow, this team is different. That if I accept this offer, if my seller accepts this offer, we're likely to have better communication and a more successful transaction because the lender's calling me even before the offer is accepted to talk about how great the buyer is, how well qualified the buyer is, how well qualified the lender is in our process and communication to them, and how well we're going to take care of them and their seller should they accept the offer. So it's critical you're working with the right lender that is going to be involved. And that's when I was talking earlier about, hey, some lenders only sell on rate and fee and they do the least amount of work up front and then say, okay, see you later. I'll see you when you get into contract. And they do nothing to help you get into contract. That's what you're paying for when you work with the right lender. I had somebody ask me this question last week, so I want to bring it up. Hey, John, why would I pay full asking price in today's market? Prices are dropping. More houses are on the market than there are buyers that want to buy them. Shouldn't I lowball all my offers? Here's the deal. There are realistic sellers, there are unrealistic sellers, and then there are super aggressive sellers. There are sellers that are still pricing homes lower than what they actually should sell for because they're looking to create a bidding war. It's a strategy. Sometimes it works and sometimes it backfires. But the fact is you've got to trust your agent because in today's market more than ever, you're going to have a realtor say, hey, you can write an offer for $30,000 below. I had a realtor tell me this morning that there was a house listed for $800,000 and the seller was about to drop $50,000 off of it. The agent had just told them there was going to be a price drop of $50,000 today. So they are going to write their offer at that number and they're going to get it turned in before the actual change happens on the Metro list in the system. And that way nobody else knows about it. They're kind of jumping in there in that strategy. So there's an opportunity where you're writing an offer for less. Sometimes it's about strategy the other way. We're saying, hey, this house is listed super aggressive. We need to go high in order to get it. The final piece of strategy I'll tell you about lowballing offers has to do with asking for seller credits. The first thing I'll tell you is I think every offer, every buyer should consider asking for seller credits before they ask to lower the price. Because a seller credit as a buyer can give you more bang for your buck and your seller feels better because they actually got full price on their offer. So before you lowball the offer, talk to me about how a seller credit may help you. It can help you buy down your interest rate permanently. It can help you with a temporary rate buy down. It can help you just come up with less cash out of pocket so you can have more money for repairs or for savings down the road. I will, if you're watching this recorded, I'm going to link down below a link to my video that talks about permanent buy downs versus temporary buy downs and what those are and what that means, because that's critical to the process of you being able to successfully negotiate an offer. Is sometimes you're better off paying full price and getting a credit of $20,000 instead of getting a $20,000 lower price. And that video is going to show you how that works. If you're watching live right now, feel free to post into comments if you want a copy of that, and I'll make sure my team sends you a copy of that. All right. So congratulations, your offer's been accepted. What happens now? Well, the first thing I always get asked is, hey, John, when do I give notice to my landlord? You give notice to your landlord once we've communicated timelines, but the truth is you're typically doing a 30-day notice to your landlord, and you might have a 21-day escrow, but we want to get past a couple of points. We want to get past the major contingencies, the appraisal, the inspections. You don't want to give notice to your landlord and then cancel this transaction, and now you're homeless. Something critical to remember. What's a rate lock and how does it work? So once you get your offer accepted, unless you did the lock and shop program, that's the moment you're going to lock your interest rate. If you did the lock and shop program, that's the moment we're going to look and say, our rate's cheaper now for us to float down. But the rate lock freezes in the interest rate for a period of time, typically 30 days, that says, hey, as long as we complete this transaction before the end of the lock period, that is your interest rate. We're guaranteeing you're going to get that interest rate and you're going to get that fee. Janice, I see you said you wanted a copy of that of that video on temporary or permanent buy downs. I'll make sure that Anna, if you could send that video to Janice, I would appreciate it. So when you are locking the interest rate, you're freezing today's rates for a period of time. If we, what we call blow the lock, if we go past that period of time, it doesn't mean you get to start over with whatever rates are, because it might be rates are lower at that time. By the way, that's not really the case in today's environment. But sometimes as rates are coming down, you're like, hey, no big deal if we blow the rate lock because I get to start over with new rates. It's not true. When you lock an interest rate, the only way it works is if you agree that, hey, no matter what happens with the rate market, I'm going to take this rate. And the lender agrees, no matter what happens with the rate market, I'm going to give you this rate. Because one of you is going to be happy and one of you is going to be sad. Either interest rates go up. You're happy that you locked in, but the lender says, man, I want out of this deal because I could have given that money to somebody else and made more interest. Or the opposite is interest rates go down, in which case you're mad because you're like, oh my gosh, I could have gotten out of this deal and gone somewhere else and paid less interest. And the lender's happy because, hey, if they didn't have this rate locked, then they would have earned less interest on their money. Somebody's going to be unhappy in the end. The only way it works is if both parties say, hey, if you complete this transaction, this is the agreed upon rate and fee. If you miss the expiration date, there's an extension fee. You don't get a better interest rate. You don't have to take a worse interest rate. You just pay an extra fee to give you more time on the lock because the investor, the lender, expected to start earning interest on the 30th day and they didn't. So you're paying a penalty to offset the fact they're not starting to earn interest at that time. That's the simplest way to say it. All right. Once you're in contract, you're going to get a boatload of disclosures. You're going to do it via DocuSign most of the time. The nice thing is DocuSign means you just click 50 times and you're done. The bad news is DocuSign means you click 50 times and you have no idea what you signed. What you need to make sure of is your loan officer explains to you the most important terms. What is my interest rate? What's my monthly payment? What are my loan fees? And what's my total cash to close? Those are the key things. Everything else in the disclosures are important, but they're really explaining all of that in a little bit too much detail. But you have to understand one particular document, which is your loan estimate, because the loan estimate goes over all of those key things in very, very great detail. What things do I have to pay for out of pocket? So you're going to have your down payment, you're going to have your closing costs, and that's going to be paid at the end of the process, at the end of escrow. But what you pay for out of pocket is the appraisal fee and any inspections. The appraisal is ordered by the lender. The inspections are ordered by your realtor. So your realtor is going to help advise you on, hey, should I do a roof inspection, a pest inspection, a full home inspection, all of the above, none of the above. A realtor is never going to tell you to do none because that makes them liable, but they'll tell you which ones are the critical ones that they think you should pay for. Recognize once you pay for those things, the money is spent. If you change your mind about buying the house, you can get your earnest money back. That's the money you paid for up front that is in advance on your down payment and closing costs. But it's also the money that the seller gets to keep if you just change your mind. So the one way to help you get your offer accepted is to have a bigger earnest money deposit, because that makes the seller recognize, man, this guy is serious. He's not going to back out just because. Okay. All right. Next thing I want to cover is what inspection should I get? I kind of covered that. It's really up to your realtor. You're going to ask your realtor, hey, what do you think is critical on this home? If this was your home, what would you get? Again, be careful because a good realtor is not going to tell you not to get an inspection, but they're going to tell you which ones are the most important ones they would make sure to get. What's the appraiser looking for? This is actually critical. There's a huge difference between the appraiser and the home inspector. The appraiser is looking at two things, value and condition. So they're looking at historical values and saying, hey, are you the only one silly enough to pay this price for this home? Or is your price within a reasonable range of what other homes are sold for? The appraiser gets a copy of your purchase contract. So they know how much you agreed to pay for the house. People are shocked all day long. They're like, oh my God, this is a scam. I paid $600 for an appraisal. And lo and behold, he said it's worth exactly what I agreed to pay for it. What I waste my money for? What the appraiser did is they said, oh, you agreed to pay $550,000 for the home. Well, I see other homes like it. Some were, there's one that sold for $525,000 that's a little bit worse than this one, doesn't have as many amenities. There's one that sold for $600,000 that's better, that's a little bit bigger and newer. So, if I were to adjust, that would basically be somewhere around $550,000. So yeah, I'm good. I agree the house is worth $550,000. A little more complicated than that, but that's a very oversimplified method of what the appraiser is doing. The second thing they're looking at is condition. Now, they're not testing everything. They're not doing a full, thorough home inspection, but they're making sure that there's no health or safety hazards and that the home is livable condition. What does that mean? It means they're going to walk around and check electricity by flipping on a light here and there. It means they're going to check running water by turning on the water in the sink. Then they're going to move it over to the hot side and wait for it to get hot. They just tested the hot water heater. They tested the gas because the sink obviously got hot because there's a gas hot water heater. They're going to turn on one of the stove burners. They're not going to turn them all on. They're going to turn on one. They're going to flush a toilet to make sure that the sewer works. They're checking things randomly to make sure the functionality is working. It's a random sample. Your home inspector goes through it in very, very great detail. So that's what you need to make sure you do is when you do a home inspection, understand they're checking every light switch, every plug. The appraiser is checking a light switch or a plug. Big, big difference. What's the role of the title company? So the title company's job is basically to act as the neutral third party. Why does that matter? Well, let's think back to when I was a kid, and hopefully you probably had a similar childhood as I did, and you had, let's call it baseball cards or Cabbage Patch dolls, or not Cabbage Patch dolls, or Cabbage Patch cards, or I don't know, whatever. Baseball cards are simple. You had a baseball card and you wanted to trade 2 of your baseball cards with one of your friends, but you didn't really trust them because you were afraid, hey, you're gonna grab my baseball card and run away with it, and I'm never gonna get the other 2. So you go to a teacher and say, hey, teacher, I'm going to give you my baseball cards and my friend's going to give you his, and then you just swap them and hand them back to us. They're a neutral third party. That's what the title company does, because you can't time perfectly when your money is going to be given to the seller and have it at the exact same moment the seller is going to sign the home over to you. You don't want to give your money to the seller unless they sign a home over to you that is free of any debt that they had. They don't want to sign the home over to you unless they know they're getting all of their money. So it's critical to have a neutral third party to handle that, and that is what the title company does. The next major component is underwriting. So underwriting is when you're in contract and now we have to reapprove your loan. I know we already went through the approval process once, but we've got to do it again. Why do you have to give all the paperwork again? First of all, you have to give it all again because it expires. We need to make sure that up until the moment we close the loan, that everything we expected to be true is true. I told the story earlier about the client. 7 years later, we got called to the carpet missing a technicality. The underwriter is the person that makes sure we don't miss those technicalities. So are we ever done asking for more paperwork? The truth is no. We have an audit department that goes through and randomly audits files the day they're going to close. Now, are we trying to find problems? Kind of. We're not trying to cause problems for you, but we need to make sure that we're not stuck buying back this loan 2, 3, 5, 7 years later. So we, by law, by rules, by regulation, have to make sure everything that we said is true at the moment we fund the loan. So we'll randomly pick up the phone and call and verify information that we don't expect has changed, but we've got to randomly sample to make sure it hasn't. And sometimes it brings up something that was missed or something that's new. So whenever you ask me or your loan officer, are you done finally? Is that it? The only right answer is no. We're not done until you get your keys. So who is the underwriter and why can't I just talk to him? Well, that's interesting. The underwriter, like I said, the underwriter's job is they're the ones that are licensed by the federal government, by Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac or whoever is endorsing the loan. Their license is on the line saying, hey, I've agreed that all of the things you want me to check, I've checked. But they need to keep some separation because they want the underwriter to make the decision based on paperwork, not on emotion. Because 5 years later, when we get called to the carpet by saying, hey, why'd you do that? Oh my gosh, because when I talked to him on the phone, he explained everything to me. Yeah, but that doesn't help because we got to have it documented in writing. So the underwriter has to have a buffer that says, I only believe things I see in writing and I can justify without having a conversation with that person. Because we don't have the luxury of having that conversation 5 years later when our file gets audited by Fannie Mae. So that's why you can't just talk to the underwriter. Now, what's the role of the processor? The loan processor is your go-between between you and the underwriter. So they're kind of a mini underwriter, but you're allowed to talk to them. They're the ones that talk to the underwriter. So they help process the file, push things to the underwriter, and get questions back from the underwriter to interpret and get the answers from you. So I get this question a fair amount. Okay, John, you talked about pre-qualification, pre-approval, and fully underwritten pre-approval. But what's the difference between like the pre-approval, but then you get the conditional approval and the final approval? The pre-approval is before you have a contract for a property. The conditional approval is the first time the underwriter has looked at your file. So when you get an email from me or a call from me that says, congratulations, your loan's approved, well, that means that the underwriter agrees that you're in good shape and you're going to get your house. But almost always there's going to be details that have to get filled in. There's going to be paperwork we have to get, questions that they've asked. So that's technically called the conditional approval. You are approved conditional upon you meeting these stipulations. And that's where the processor jumps in and they gather those things from you, they gather those things from me, and they resubmit to the underwriter to get final approval. Final approval says, I've reviewed everything and we're done, except there's conditions that are called prior to funding conditions. So those are things we're going to double check, like your employment. And we're going to make sure that you're still employed the day that we go to fund your loan. We're going to double check things like, where did the money come from? You gave me a bank account at Wells Fargo that showed $100,000 in there, but the wire came in from a Chase bank account that we never saw. That's going to be a problem. And you say, wait a second, John, you gave me final approval. I could do anything I want. I went out and bought a mattress. I had final approval. One of the prior to funding conditions is to double check the credit and make sure nothing's changed about the credit. So don't do anything different with your money or your credit until you get your keys, because even final approval isn't really final. So the last part of this process is closing. What'll happen is you're going to get a document called the closing disclosure, which is going to outline all of your numbers all over again. And it's going to give you 3 days to review that before you sign your final paperwork. The final step then is you're going to meet with the notary and you're going to give them the money. You're going to sign papers with the notary and you're going to give them the money via a cashier's check to cover the remainder of your down payment and closing costs, or you can wire the money in. But you cannot pay via personal check. You can't bring in a suitcase full of cash, even though I think it'd be super cool to walk in with a couple of security guards and a suitcase full of cash and say, bam, give me my house. That'd be kind of cool. But it never happens. So it's only in the movies that happens. And then at that point, you get the keys. Super, super excited. When you get your keys is obviously the time at which we've been celebrating, because that's what we've been working towards. The thing that most people want to ask, and it's the last thing I'm going to point out, is we're right about out of time right now, is, okay, so I've got my keys. Now, when is my first payment? It's actually really important to understand that. You pay interest for last month's mortgage interest. So when you make a payment on October 1st, it pays for September's interest. So if you buy a house and you close escrow on September 15th, we can only bill you in 1 whole month increments. On October 1st, you owe interest for September, but only for a half a month. I can't bill you for that. So instead, you prepaid September's interest as part of your closing costs. You make no payment on October 1st. Your first payment is November 1st. So you make a payment on the 1st of the month following your first full month of ownership. There's a couple of exceptions, like if you close on the 2nd of a month, then maybe we give you a credit of interest for 2 days and you actually pay 28 days later. So there are some minor exceptions, but in general, if you're closing in October, your first payment is December. If you're closing in January, your first payment is March 1st. So it gives you a nice little buffer. All right, guys. Well, I know I covered a lot in the last hour. I appreciate you spending your time here. Continue to join me every Friday for my Financial Fridays. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel and share this with your friends. So if you like this video, click the share button and share it to other social media outlets and tell people just how amazing this information is. Because I talked about 3 things a loan officer needs to do for you, and that is they need to educate you, they need to communicate with you, and they need to make sure that you close on time. Well, this is part of the educational component and the communication component, and I pride myself in really delivering on that, and I need your help helping other people get that same message. Kathy, I appreciate the shout out. Thank you so much for listening, everybody. Please share, subscribe, and comment, and have an absolutely